Welcome to Coffee with Democrats, a sensible platform for progressive conversations. Coffee with Democrats is a grassroots movement dedicated to hearing from Democrats, candidates, legislators, and friends from all political backgrounds who want great conversations. Coffee with Democrats is committed to increase Democrat voter registration and Democrat voter turnout by making voting more exciting and meaningful. And now here's your host of Coffee with Democrats, Kevin Dawson.
Well, hey, good morning, everybody. This is going to be an exciting conversation today. We've got with us Representative Gloria Johnson, from Tennessee. She's an outstanding representative of the Democratic Party and the Democratic movement and preserving democracy in the United States. And we are just beyond excited to have Representative Johnson with us today. Again, this is so overwhelming for us to be able to have somebody of your stature on with us, and we are just excited beyond words. So thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Absolutely, I'm thrilled to be here.
So I've got a little story to tell you that my cousin lives in Maryville, Tennessee.
Oh.
And my uncle and aunt who have passed on used to live in Knoxville. He used to work for the Southern Railway over there. And it was a beautiful love story about my aunt and uncle and how they met in South Carolina during World War II, and then how their life was just a Cinderella story, and it was just a beautiful people, and we grew to love Tennessee tremendously. Going to the Smoky Hills, you just live in God's country, and we appreciate you and appreciate where you are from.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it is just an absolutely beautiful place, and I love it. We need some work, but it's a beautiful place to live.
Right. Well, and politics aside, politics is what politics has always been, but it's been more contentious here lately than I can ever remember in my lifetime.
Yes.
But I think that we always talk about here in the state of Oklahoma, the Oklahoma standard, and we say that about almost every state. The Tennessee standard or the Georgia standard or wherever you're from.
Yeah.
And how that standard really is important for everybody to understand. We are people. And we occupy the same space, and we have a lot of shared values. And I want to talk to you just a little bit about some of that here in just a moment. But first, let's talk about. I mean, this is Coffee with Democrats. This is an opportunity for us to have a conversation, sit down and have a cup of coffee, and just enjoy the morning and spend a little bit of time in conversation with one another. And so let's talk about your favorite coffee of choice.
Um, let's see. Honestly, I'll drink whatever coffee's around. um, so I have to have it every morning. That's for sure. And but I'm not super particular. And I'm just I'm not a fancy coffee drinker at all. But I do enjoy and love my morning coffee.
So I can just imagine, I know a little bit about your background, your father and his government work.
Uh huh.
And I can just imagine at the morning coffee table when you were growing up and when you were first introduced to allowed to drink a cup of coffee, because if you were like me and as growing up, you weren't allowed to touch coffee until you got a certain age.
Well,
And
my parents didn't even drink coffee.
oh, okay.
So I didn't drink coffee till probably after college.
I
Uh,
see.
yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, I can just imagine that cup of black coffee.
Now all my dad's brothers all drank black coffee, and I was like, I said, it's not the depression, y'all. You can put cream and sugar in it now.
Right, exactly. So, just for a little bit of housekeeping for those people who are listening in, and we really appreciate all of our listeners. Everybody is just so wonderful who comes on here and joins us. Um, and we're also going to be this is also on our YouTube and Facebook on the live segments. So we're on several platforms. But just a
Uh-huh.
little bit of housekeeping for those who are on here with us today. If you have a question, please go down to the question bubble in the lower right hand corner and write your question out. I may not be able to get to everybody that asks a question because this really is more of a comprehensive conversation that we're going to have with Representative Johnson. And so it may not be an opportunity for us to talk to everybody or have everybody's questions spoken. But if you have a question, you want to put it down into the question bubble. We'll try to get to those, as many of those as we can. And for those people who are listening in, let's talk just a little bit about who Gloria Johnson is. And though her family has been in East Tennessee for generations, one of the things that just shocked the hell out of me is to find out that you grew up or you were born in Colorado.
Uh-huh. Yes.
And what a beautiful place, God's country. And there's so many places in the United States it is truly God's country, and Tennessee is one of them. Colorado is another one. There're just so many places where you can go and commune with God and just really enjoy the place. And you were born in Colorado. Your family was moved from Colorado to California. Then you wound up in Mississippi. A lot of that had to do with your father's work in the government. He was an FBI special agent.
Yeah, yeah. When you go into the FBI, the first thing they do, or at least that they did back then, was send you to a large city. And
Right.
so that's why he went to Denver. Then after you do the large city, we were only there a couple of years. Then you go to a top 10 city. And so that's when they sent him to LA.
Right.
And then we moved to San Diego. And then he kept trying to get back east to Tennessee. So he took a position in Mississippi because that was close. And then we got back here by the time I was in the 6th grade.
Do you remember much about your time in Mississippi?
Oh yeah, I will never forget my time in Mississippi. It was terrible times at that point with all of the unrest and civil rights issues going on down there. There was when we were sitting at home, less than a mile from our house, the KKK bombed a Jewish synagogue, and we actually could hear it at our house. My dad, guessed kind of what had happened, went and picked up his partner, and they had their eyes on the guys, and they picked them up
Oh,
that night, and they picked three of them up anyway, and they threatened the KKK threatened to kill our family. We had to move out of our house for a time until they rounded everybody up.
oh my goodness. That had to have been scary as a child to have that kind of activity taking on and involving your family.
Yeah. It was.
Well, then you moved on from that contentious, that time frame in the 60s and 70s. There was a lot of issues that were going on throughout the South, including, Tennessee and including Oklahoma. But I think you can, it alludes to that you moved back to Knoxville, and this is where your family truly was from, and this was home for your family. Is that accurate?
Yes, that is accurate. We, my dad's family had been here for years.
Well, that had to have been a relief to be with family and the comfort of being around family after such a contentious time. It had to have been something, to give you at ease to be able to grow up and grow up
Yeah.
in peace.
Yeah, we always knew that this was home, and that the family was always trying to get back to Tennessee. And so he was able to do that, and we were just really happy to be back.
So my aunt and uncle, they lived on the east side. They lived on Eagle Drive. That's all I remember. I remember going there and spending a lot of our summertime. We'd go up to the swimming pool, and Knoxville truly was like most communities. It was just such a beautiful place. Knoxville has got great memories for me. Going to the swimming pool, spending all day at the swimming pool with the kids that I didn't even know, who embraced me, and we played all day long, hard as children. Do you have memories that are similar to that when at Knoxville?
Oh, absolutely. We spent every day, all day long at the pool in the summertime.
Right, right.
And it's true, back then, when we went out in the morning or afternoon after school, we didn't come in until they made us come in at dark. So
Right.
we were
Well,
always out playing.
I,
So it
I,
was just a wonderful place to grow up.
right. Well, we had a very strict curfew in my family. I had to be home before the first street light came on. That was if and it wasn't very far away. My mother would go to the front door and look over across the street, and if that street light was on when I was coming through the door, man, I tell you what, it was the term that I grew up with, going to be hell to pay. And but after you went through, your primary schools, you went on and pursued the University of Tennessee, your hometown, Tennessee, right there in Knoxville. Tell
Yeah.
us a little bit about what you studied and what the purpose was for going to Knoxville.
Yeah. Well, UT growing up, that's where my dad went, and so we all knew that we were gonna go to University of Tennessee for sure, because we just grew up on the balls. So
Right,
that was a standard, and it's a great school, and back in those days, I was able to, I lived at home while I went to college, and I was able to pay for my college as I went. I worked full time while I was in college and didn't have to have a student loan. At that time, you could work and have a minimum wage job and be able to pay for your college.
right.
And
And what was your degree work in?
special education.
Okay. What was the reason why you chose special education?
Um, I don't know. I think that it was just always aware of students that struggled and needed extra help, and knew that that was important and that everybody deserved a good education. And so that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to help people who struggled.
Was it just general special education, or was it specific to like autism or
Well,
any anything in particular?
the degree was general, but you kind of go like my first job, for whatever reason, I had a lot of students who struggled with behavior and had emotional issues. And so I had an amazing principal and a special ed teacher that I taught with. And they were just so great at working with those emotionally disturbed kids. That ended up being the direction I went from the very beginning because I was just able to to click with those kids. Some people find it really difficult to work with that um, type of child, but I thrived in it and was able to connect with them very often. So it ended up that mostly I worked with the behavior disorder students.
So let's talk a little bit about Gloria Johnson, the teacher. You spent quite a few years as a teacher, as an educator. At what point did you decide? Was it just that, that lightning strike that just hit you so hard you said, like, I've got to run for office, or was it something that over a period of time that you decided this is something that I really need to be involved in?
Yeah, well, the interesting thing, I always voted, but I wasn't super political or, I wasn't involved in any party politics. Um, but what you find often with a lot of women um, is they get involved when it affects when something's affecting their career.
Sure.
I had been fed up with after 8 years of George Bush. That was not something I wanted to see happen again. So, I saw that I thought if I don't if I don't do anything, it's on me too. If I don't get involved and work for the change that I wanted. And I had seen Barack Obama. I used to go to Chicago about 4 times a year to visit with my aunt, and I had seen things he was doing in Illinois and was really impressed. And so when he announced to run, I offered to volunteer. And so I got involved first in politics that way, trained with his best organizers early in the campaign. And, the more you work in politics, the more you learn about policy, the more you learn about what's going on and how to get involved. So after that, and then at the same time in Tennessee, teachers were losing a seat at the table. They were taking away their collective bargaining rights. And we all knew that this was in the march to privatize public education. That's often where they started. Take
Right.
away a teacher's seat at the table, so then you could chip away at public education in order to privatize it. So when that started happening, some friends that I had organized with in the Obama campaign convinced me to run for office, and that's why I first ran. It
And
was
that,
it was that and was that education piece, and also at that time we were working for healthcare,
oh
and
yeah,
healthcare was critically important to me as well.
right. We all remember it, when Obama first came into office and how important it was for the Affordable Care Act to be passed, and how important it was because there were so many people throughout the United States that had no insurance whatsoever, and they were being saddled, and sometimes medical bills were being um, imposed on people to the degree that they would lose their homes.
Right.
And
Well, and my sister ended up, losing her home and her business because of medical bills in that time.
right. I'm going to relate a personal story. In 2008, on our anniversary, my wife and I, we were married on May 14th, and on May 14th, 2008, she was diagnosed with breast cancer, and we knew that we were going to have an uphill battle. And she had to have a double mastectomy, lots of radiation, chemotherapy. She had to do the whole gamut, reconstruction, all that stuff.
Right.
We had United Healthcare insurance, thankfully, through my job, but they reneged on all of their contractual obligations, and said that we were not allowed to go to a certain doctor that was close to our home, that we were going to have to travel 100 miles to go over to St. Louis to a doctor over there. And anyhow, it racked up almost $1 million just overnight in medical care. And our credit score went from almost a perfect credit score to almost zero. And we had creditors knocking on our door. We had, there was just significant amounts of struggle that went through in that, to that degree that I can empathize and understand completely where people were so involved back in the 2010 timeframe of getting the Affordable Care Act in place, so that we wouldn't have this kind of pressure, this financial burden that was saddling so many people throughout the United States. So thankfully we got it resolved, but it took us almost 5 to 6 years to recover, even after the resolution, because once your credit score is hit, it don't come back. You have to work at it to get it to come back. That's enough about me. I'm sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah. I mean, that's what we're hearing all the time. These stories just nonstop.
Right.
And it was just critical to work for the Affordable Care Act.
Right. So you ran for office. What was the first year that you when you ran for office, and tell us whether it was successful or not?
Okay, well, the first year I ran, it ended up that one of our state senators resigned early, and there was a special election. And that was an election that was, we knew that was near impossible to win. And I got in it late. It was really all of 2 months, I believe. But the situation was there were 3 women running on the Republican side. And I went to a couple of debates, and all I could think was, this is terrible. They're not discussing anything that we care about.
Right.
Some friends of mine at the state party said, Gloria, you need to run just to change the conversation. There's not going to be a conversation about healthcare or about public ed if someone's not up there. And I'd never ever thought of myself as someone who might run for office. And so it took a minute, but I also trusted their judgment, and decided I would get in that very short race, and that had 70 in a district that was probably 75% Republican and 25% Democrats. And but I thought that if we don't try to change the conversation, it'll never happen. So I got in that race. It was for a limited time, but because we wanted to talk about the issues that Democrats care about. It wasn't, none of those things were being mentioned. So I got in the race and was able to talk about healthcare, was able to talk about public education, and we, in those 2 months, we moved the needle 7 digits. We gained 7 points.
Right.
And so that was my first race. It was one that I knew probably wasn't going to happen, but we needed to give people a choice and to change the conversation.
Correct. Yeah. So from that point, let's step forward. When were you elected?
So that was a 2011 special, And then in 2012, and 2010, they redistricted, and so that all changed in 2011. And the district that I have lived in became about a +9 R district, where before it had been a +2 D. And there was a Democrat in that seat. He was there, I think, for 22 years. But because they redistricted and drew it into a +9 R district, he decided to go ahead and retire. And because that was an open seat, and I had lifted my name recognition a little bit in the special election, I ran in 2012 and won then.
Okay, in 2012.
But by less than 300 votes.
Wow, that's just amazing. And considering the area that you're in the Knoxville area, there you've got some blue areas in there, but Maryville and that area in the southeast part, or excuse me, southwest part of Knoxville, it's a little bit more red out there. You get a little bit more rural.
Yeah, our county, Knox County, is definitely red. The city is blue, but my district at the time was partially in the city and also partially in that South Knox County, right along the Blount County line.
Right,
So yeah, it was pretty red.
right. Well, and that's an amazing accomplishment, and congratulations to you for that. You know your campaign, and I'm sure after the 10 years since then, you've looked back at that campaign and really thought how transformative it actually became for the people and
Yeah,
for yourself.
and I was the first woman to ever hold that seat, so that was a big thing too.
So you mentioned something a little bit ago about having that conversation about things we care about. And I'm
Yeah,
going to change our conversation a little bit, because I think that a lot of us on here, we want to start getting into the meat and potatoes about legislation that's going on, and having some conversation with you about some of your about your feelings and comments about some of the legislation that's taken place. And one of the heavy hitting conversations that we want to have with you coming out of Tennessee is the new bill that got proposed, the Don't Say Gay bill, that's worse than Florida's, and about four more bills that go along with it that are equally filled with bile and hate. Can you talk a little bit about those and your perceptions?
yeah. I think about the campaign of this current session that we're in, which was in 2022. And, we knocked thousands of doors, and we talked to people in the district about the things that they care about. And they talked to us. We had just passed a law the prior session in Tennessee that criminalized being homeless. That, for camping outside anywhere, you could be charged with a felony. And so imagine being homeless and having a felony. What are the chances? It makes it 100 times harder to get a job, certainly when you have a felony, and that makes it 100 times harder to find housing.
Right.
So we're just
Punishing people
creating a
for
worse cycle than we had before. They do not think. And then so people were very upset about that law when I was campaigning. People were very upset that we were banning books. We had multiple bills to ban books. And so these are the things that people talk to me about on the doorstep that they had concerns about, and really serious concerns about those things. And we still don't have Medicaid expansion in Tennessee. That was a
right,
huge issue people wanted solved. They want Medicaid passed, and it doesn't matter which side of the aisle you're on. Republicans, independents, and Democrats all want Medicaid expansion. Families I talk to want paid family leave. All sides of the aisle. It's not a Democratic issue.
right.
Republicans, independents, and Democrats overwhelmingly want it. But we went into this session, their very first bill was a ban on drag. just outrageous. No one ever asked about that. No one said they're concerned about drag queens and want a bill to ban them. As a matter of fact, people thought it was ridiculous.
Right.
But here they go. The very first bill out of the gates was that, and a bill to prevent transgender care.
So
And it,
as a citizen of Tennessee and of East Tennessee, and you've got a very famous actress, songwriter, not very far to the east of you, over in Pigeon Forge area.
yeah.
And how many men in the past 20, 30, 40 years have dressed like Dolly Parton during Halloween?
I
And
can't
now,
even I can't even imagine, but you know what? I was just overseas for vacation, and a friend of mine was in Ireland, and Ireland had the largest gathering of people dressed as Dolly in the world. It was some world record of people dressed as Dolly, and I'm sure a whole lot of those folks were men. Well, even Dolly herself has said, if I was a man, I would have been a drag queen. You know,
right.
she can, women can also dress as women in drag. So, and she jokes about that herself. People have been doing that for years, and nobody said a word, and nobody cared. And
And now
all of a sudden, it's an issue.
all of a sudden, we've got some kind of right wing extremism that says that has to be something we target. We
Right,
want to
right.
target that freedom and eliminate it.
Even though there's someone on Twitter, Bex here in Tennessee, and they point out every single day these people that are arrested for abusing children or sexually assaulting children, and every single time it's a pastor or something like that,
Right.
and rarely ever do you hear anything different. They in Tennessee, you would think that this was such a danger, but it's a non-issue, an issue that does not happen, and they're acting hair on fire about it. It's 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 just dumb, quite frankly.
Right.
It's abusive to the LGBTQ community who wants to just live their life and are doing nothing to upset anyone.
Right. Right.
Yet
Exactly.
they're under attack in Tennessee and in other states.
Right. Oklahoma's one of them, exactly the same way, and it's horrendous what we're seeing all over. And and what's amazing is it's the people in power only represent about 10% of the total population, and that's all they care about.
Right, right.
Not the 90% that are out here having to live under those rules. But anyway, I do have so Coffee with Democrats is becoming a United States wide organization, and we have chapters in several different states. And one of my colleagues in Ohio, Ray Domingo, he's on here, and we've agreed to have him ask you a question. So, Ray, you want to ask that question?
Sure. Thank you so much, Kevin. Appreciate it. Good morning, Gloria. It's great talking to you again. Thank you
Hi.
so much for being here. Appreciate it. Um, since we're on the topic of the LGBTQIA plus community, um, question is, Ohio, like several other states, have passed a horrible bill, Parental Bill of Rights, where educators like yourself are required to immediately notify students or guardians of children and having to force outing children, identifying themselves as part of the community. You yourself, as being a longtime educator and advocate for children and a member of the LGBTQIA plus community, what is your response to this bill and protections for the children? This is a two-part question, but I'll let you answer that one.
I wouldn't do it. I would never tell somebody else to break the rules or whatever, but no, I would never do that. Never. I would not. And if I had to be fired, whatever would happen, because I would never ever do that. I have known kids who had parents that were or could be abusive. I've known kids who were, when their parents found out, literally kicked them out of the home. I have a friend who was kicked out mid-year, his senior year, because his stepsister outed him to his parents. And they literally, 17 years old, and which is illegal, they kicked him out of the house. It was a week before Christmas. And he had to go find a place to live with another friend. He could not go to his school, so he didn't want to go to a new school with all the emotional stuff that was going on. He got a job. He walked to our adult school. He didn't want to get a GED. He wanted a diploma. Walked every day to the adult school until he was able to graduate.
Hmm.
And I would never, ever wish that on a kid. And you are damaging children if you do that. It makes me literally sick to my stomach. It's just pure evil.
Yeah, it definitely is. And the one thing that the right is not thinking of is that they don't know the conditions that children are living in after they leave school. That sometimes
I
school is
would
the
say they
safest
don't
place.
care.
Yeah, exactly. They don't care. They're not thinking that school is the safest place for children, and it's a place where children are guaranteed their meal, and their
Right.
safety,
Right.
and that they don't care. They're only thinking of one thing, and their own personal agenda.
Yes.
Um, the second question is, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but if rumors are true, and you would be potentially running for Senate against Marsha Blackburn, um, how would you help fight for the federal bill held up in the Senate called the Equality Act to ensure that the LGBTQ plus community finally gets federal protections, to ensure these hateful, discriminating bills finally get put to an end?
Well, so what I'll say about that is I am considering a run. I haven't made that final decision yet, but if I were to make that decision, one thing that I'm known for in Tennessee is being a fighter and standing up every time. And that's what I will do. There are a lot of things that we have got to fight, and I will fight as hard as I possibly can, and push and try to raise awareness as much as possible on that issue, on women's reproductive rights. All of these things are critical, and we have to fight all of them, and fight for all of them. But, those are the reasons that if I do decide to, it will be because of things like that. We have got to protect people from these red states, quite frankly, and protect our democracy. I mean, the whole point, the thing about Democrats is we care about the rights of every single citizen. We want to lift up everyone. We don't pick a certain group that we support and respect them. We need to respect the human dignity of every single Tennessean, of every American. And it's not happening with my colleagues across the aisle. As a matter of fact, they are disrespecting so many people, the majority, because they have said that women are not equal. When you say a woman does not have autonomy over her own body, you are saying women are not equal. That's it. And so when you are saying and taking away rights from the LGBTQ community, you are saying they are not equal. And that is unacceptable. It's inhumane. It's
Right.
inhuman.
When you and I grew up in a time period where women's rights and what women's liberation was a big deal in the 1960s and 70s when I was a kid growing up, and then when Roe was actually enacted, I was too young to really be concerned about it. But as I became of age, I understood the implication of that and
Yeah.
how important that was for that entire women's liberation movement. So We have Calais on here from Arkansas, or our chapter in Arkansas. Calais, you have a question?
I do. Thank you. Hi, Representative
Hi
Johnson. Thank you for
again.
joining us. So good to talk to you again. Um, you answered the question already. We had a question in the chat that I wanted to get to from Kimberly Page. And I do want to invite you to join us on Coffee with Democrats if you do decide to run, which I hope you do, to announce. We would love to have you on to do that. I have a question, and then I want to invite my friend Chris Mowry up to ask a question. He is working with Madeline's campaign, and he's been so amazing, helping to motivate Gen Z even more. They're awesome. But my
Yeah.
question for you, you have sponsored some amazing bills. I was looking through, and I'll put a link to all of them in the chat so that everybody can check them out. Something that's been very important to me are these red flag laws. And please correct me if I'm wrong, Tennessee does not have red flag laws.
Tennessee does not. The last, I guess, I'll have another one this year, but I've carried a red flag law and I've carried a safe storage law. I was teaching at Central High School in 2008 when we had a school shooting and lost a student. You will never forget the terror on the kids' faces as they ran screaming into my classroom as I was preparing for class that morning. It happened in the cafeteria, the commons where all the kids are in the morning before they go to class. And I'll just never forget kids running down the hill to my classroom just with terror on their faces and screaming. And the idea that we've done nothing since then, as often as we have these school shooting happen, and we're talking about ridiculous things like arming teachers and putting in more security. And we had a leader of the Republican caucus say, if we need to put tanks in front of the schools, we'll put tanks in front of the schools. And I'm just like, how is it possible that you all miss the point so badly? We do not want a gun battle at the schoolhouse door, or we don't want a gun battle in the classroom. We want to prevent the guns from ever getting to the schoolhouse door. Because if you're waiting for a gun battle, there will be death. And the idea is to make sure the guns never get to the schoolhouse door. Make sure that dangerous people don't have weapons. And red flag laws and safe storage laws can do a huge part to ensure that doesn't happen.
We have a question concerning, again, we're going back and talking a little bit about the Dobbs, but there's some stuff that came out of Tennessee with legislation where it talks about a rapist having more rights than a person that was a victim of that violent rape.
Absolutely.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, when you take it down to the truth, a violent rapist has the right to choose the mother of their child. But a victim of a violent rape, a woman, does not have the right not to have her rapist baby in Tennessee. We have a trigger ban that allows for no abortions. There is no exception for life of the mother. A 10-year-old is forced to carry a pregnancy. And with the trigger ban, they say this year they say we created an exception. And we did have a Republican doctor write a pretty good exception for life of the mother. And it's something I would have voted for. But instead, they turned that one down and had right to life write the exception bill, and all the exception covers is an ectopic pregnancy or a dead fetus. Doesn't consider when you've got a woman with an aortic aneurysm or a woman with cancer who needs treatment now and can't wait. Doesn't consider any of that. Just an ectopic pregnancy is the only exception, which is, it's important, but it is not the majority of when people have problems with pregnancies. And
Right.
so there is no concern for women or young girls by my colleagues across the aisle in Tennessee. No concern for women whatsoever. It's all about forced birth.
Right. Right. So Kelly, I'm going to turn this back to you for a minute as the co-host. You had Chris that you wanted to introduce. Would you go ahead and introduce Chris?
Yes, thank you. We do have quite a few requests. If you guys would put your questions in the chat, I'm going to bring Georgia up after Chris speaks, but I do want to introduce Chris. Chris Mowry is such an amazing person. He's such an amazing human. I'm sure everybody in here is pretty aware. If you're not, he has some amazing TikToks to check out, but he has been so awesome with Madeline Ryan Smith's campaign in Georgia in helping out with that. And he had a question for you, Representative Johnson.
Okay.
Hey guys, thanks so much for having me up. I really appreciate it. And Representative Johnson, I really appreciate what you do. I appreciate you being here. I guess my question is, I'm a 21-year-old, and I do like advocate a lot for Gen Z. I think the Gen Z vote obviously is very important. And so I guess my question is, when I have friends ask me or family members who may be similar to my age, I struggle to answer the question, what's the best way you think it is to have Gen Z get involved? If you're just starting, or maybe you don't know where to start, how do you think the best way is to get involved with Democrats, or maybe help a campaign, whether that's social media or volunteering, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, I after I left teaching, I was statewide director of OFA, which we had a fellows program where we trained up young leaders, mostly college kids, to become organizers or fight for the issues that they care about. And so, Gen Z is amazing. And I hear people bash them all the time. And I'm just like, I don't know who you're talking about, because I have so many young people that are supportive. Actually, me and my campaign manager have a business here where we are training people right now. We decided to go ahead and train organizers, train people that could be campaign staff, um, using the city council elections this year to prepare them to be able to run a race or work on a race in 24. And so sometimes it's important to make those opportunities, because there's so many people that care about their community and want to work, and we've got to give them that opportunity. And even with a little bit of training, they just really excel. One of the hardest workers on my last campaign was in high school, and so he knocked more doors, I'm certain, than anyone, and as just gotten involved and is loving it. But you do have to find a campaign where somebody recognizes the abilities of young people and all the talents that they have and that they bring to the table, and get them involved and engaged. I wish I had gotten involved and engaged when I was in college, but it was much later for me. But kids care deeply, they're smart, they're savvy, and we need them on our team. There's just no question. And usually, pretty much, you know much of my team is in their 20s, or they're in their teens. That's just the way it is. And find somebody you like. Find someone who speaks to the issues that you care about. People tell me all the time, we've got to get those young people to vote. Well, guess what? How do you get young people to vote? The same way you get old people to vote. You talk about the issues they care about. They care about gun safety. They care about climate change. They care about equity and equality issues. If you're not speaking to the issues that they care about, they're probably not going to come work for you, and they're probably not going to be excited to vote for you. And so it's just critical that we listen to them, talk to them and listen to them, get them on board, and talk about the things that they care about, because you guys are our future. And we need to make this world a better place. We are doing this for this generation. You know, they're the generation. I didn't worry about gun violence in my classroom when I was in school. I'm You folks have grown up doing active shooter drills. This is huge to you. You all are going to be on this damaged planet for a long time. You know, some of us are not going to be here that much longer. It'll probably be fine my whole life. But you all are the ones that are going to have to live in this and deal with it. And so we should be listening and we should be speaking to those very important issues for our kids, for our grandkids, for everyone coming after.
Exactly right. And your words were so profound and it's so amazing. I do need to change the topic for just a minute. As we've only got you on here for a little over 10 more minutes before we have to drop off. But one of the critical stories that I think we need to hear, and we probably need to hear this often, is the events that transpired on March 30th when you were joined, when you actually joined protesters who marched on the Tennessee State Capitol to call lawmakers to address gun reform. And this, you just spoke about that, but I want to go a little bit more in depth. Do you want to speak
Sure.
about that?
Sure. You know, we had this horrible tragedy happen just a few miles down the road from the Capitol. There's just parents that were just in agony, students that were afraid and were sick and tired of this happening and being ignored on this issue. So many school shootings, and you think something's going to happen, but nobody has the political courage or the political will to do what is right by our students, by our communities. And we knew that these parents were going to be showing up on this particular day and these students. And so I went early. I went about an hour and a half early before session just to go and speak to the people as they came in. And I talked to so many moms who came in, you know, with tears in their eyes and said, I just dropped my kids off at school. I hope they're safe when they come home on the bus, or I hope they're safe when I go to pick them up. Tears in their eyes because they are concerned about their kids being safe at school. Someone mentioned the importance of safety at school earlier when we were talking about the LGBTQ community, but it also goes to these kids that have grown up in schools where they've had to do active shooter drills all the time, every year. And so, um, talking to these parents who were just so passionate. They'd never come to the Capitol before. They'd never protested anything before. And then there's so many students, and they're lined in the rotunda. They're outside around the building. They're on Legislative Plaza, and the rotunda is full. I stood out there chanting with them for a while outside before coming into session. And I'm talking about parents who had their toddlers on their shoulders and, uh, that just came because they wanted to see something done. We go onto the House floor. I watch my colleagues walk into the chambers, walk through the masses of people. They cleared a line for everybody to walk through. And my colleagues across the aisle would not even make contact with them, eye contact. They wouldn't talk to them, and they didn't even make eye contact as they walked past them. And that was so hurtful to me that these people are hurting and you won't even see them. We get on the floor. Normally we have welcoming and honoring. Well, we all went up to the well together with the representative Bob Freeman from that district, and he recognized the situation and recognized covenant. And but there were many of us who wanted to welcome and honor people we knew who were there, who were also victims of gun violence. And they didn't allow that to happen. They didn't allow any more for welcoming and honoring. And then, so we decided, we were talking and we're thinking, we cannot have these thousands of people here today and not speak to them. And so, we would try, the guys tried when talking about a bill to speak to it as they finished talking about the bill, but their mics were cut and were not allowed. And so we just talked about we've got to recognize these parents. How can we do that? And then we just decided that in between bills, we would go to the well and say we wanted to say to the parents, we see you, we hear you, we care about your issue, and we want to talk about that. We want to do something about that issue. That's all we wanted to say, and we were not allowed to say it. And so we decided to go to the well and speak to those parents. And within 15 seconds, they cut the mic. So my colleague had a little mini bullhorn, and so they cut the mic after 15 seconds, and they called a recess. And at that point, we had a bullhorn and used that to speak to the crowd and to speak in the room. It's a very huge room, and if you don't have a microphone, no one's going to hear you. So use that mini bullhorn to speak, send a message to those parents that we heard them and we saw them.
Well, that's such an amazing conversation, and you're relating that story. It's so hurtful to hear, the response from the Republicans in wanting to shut down that free speech and the
Yes.
recognition of what was taking place. There was, as a result of that, you, Justin Jones, and Justin Pearson, Representatives Jones and Pearson, you guys were dubbed the Tennessee Three, which
Yeah.
very fitting. I love that. At least they got that right. You guys were the most vocal. You stood in unity with one another, and you were accused of breaking the House's decorum rules by leading those personal protests for gun reform on the House floor and joining the demonstrations in the chamber's public galleries during the legislative session. And all three of you at one point were your names were brought up for expulsion. That
Yeah,
had
we all
been
had an expulsion resolution filed against us. We all were given no time. Uh, there was no investigation. Typically, with something like that, there's a long investigation, things like that. None of that happened. We knew when we went to the well, we might get, some sort of pushback or some sort. We did that. Even, however, it was less of a disruption than every other year previous. I mean, or any other thing that happened. Even something that happened the next week was worse. I mean, as far as taking time on the floor, we had a member shove another member and steal his cell phone.
right,
And,
right,
it looked like a basketball court fight, kind of where they were pulling each other away from each other. And, that was a actual assault and theft, and nothing happened to that member. And it's just remarkable. We knew that we were a target already. They drew me out of literally drew my block out of my district in redistricting. I had to move to run this last time. They changed the district I lived in for 30 years.
right.
So we knew that we were a target because we are vocal. And so um, you know, it was I did not get expelled. I got one more vote to keep me than the young men did, and I do believe it was because of my race. And so they were expelled. And uh, you know, it feels okay now because they were reappointed. I'm certain that they're going to win their elections. They've got an election August 3rd. They had to run again. We spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in Tennessee for a special election for them, and this has ended up costing Tennessee a lot of money. But the actions of these Republicans who were just so angry that we stood up for our constituents. We see it as doing our job.
Right.
As Rep. John Lewis did when they sat in on the floor of Congress. Sometimes you have to get in the way. Sometimes you have to get in good trouble.
Good trouble. That's exactly right.
And that was a time when those parents and students needed to be heard and seen. And so we did what we felt was right for our constituents. And we find out afterwards in polling multiple times and in the responses to the governor about a special session that hopefully will happen next month, 80% of Tennesseans, that's Republicans, independents, and Democrats, want to see red flag laws in Tennessee.
Right.
And they are still refusing.
Right. And that's the 10% that's controlling the rest of the 90% of the population. And that's so, it's unfair and it's unjust.
Yes.
So let's change, because we're just down to our last seconds of our session today with you. And we really appreciate you coming on and being with us today. But can you relate to us something? Let's change the mood. Let's end this on such a positive, upbeat conversation. Can you relate to us something that was extremely funny, or a funny story that you have that you've been involved in as a representative that you'd like to share with the rest of us?
You know, I was trying to think of that, and I was really I had a hard time thinking of something that was really funny. There have been a lot of funny, weird things, but I think what I would say is, in the most positive and uplifting way, is the result of that attempt at an expulsion and us going to the well. I think is the most hopeful moment I have seen in a long time. You have seen these young people just be passionate and show up, and these parents show up. We saw women that came every single day for like the last 7 to 10 days, I think, with signs that said Republicans for gun sense legislation. That what is so wonderful to me is that there's a movement afoot in Tennessee. People are seeing things differently now. People are telling me they're going to vote differently. And the young people have not stopped organizing. They've held rallies in multiple counties. The parents are organizing. They're down at the Capitol talking to legislators every day. It's just an overwhelming movement, I think, that is happening. And I think good things are going to happen in 2024 as a result of this in Tennessee.
Well, you went from funny to inspirational, and I can't think of a better way to close down our conversation than to have such inspirational comments from you that can inspire all of us to move forward and continue to fight the fight for democracy. And we're so grateful to allow, to be allowed to have this conversation with you.
Yeah.
Because it really is so meaningful and inspirational. You are a peer, you are a leader, and we are so grateful for everything that you do, not only for the Tennesseans that you represent, but for the nation as a whole. We really look to you for inspiration, and you are a great, great person. And thank you so much for coming on Coffee with Democrats.
Oh, well, thank you all very much. I've enjoyed it, and it was great talking with you, and I love what you're doing. I love this show.
Well, great. And keep us in mind if you do get to that point where you want to make an announcement, we will cover it live, so that we can help you broaden your footprint and your voice. We want to help assist you in everything that you do.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, and great talking to y'all.
Great to talk to you too. And we wish you nothing but the best in the future. So next week, we're going to have another very important guest come on Coffee with Democrats. That's going to be the Oklahoma Senate Minority Leader, Kay Floyd, is going to be on here with us. Next week is going to be an abbreviated, shorter version. It's only going to be 30 minutes from 10:30 to 11 o'clock Central Time next week. Her schedule isn't going to allow her to be on here for more than 30 minutes, but We're really looking forward to that conversation. And this has got to be among one of the best conversations we've had with Coffee with Democrats. It's going to be ranked up there as one of the best. And it's all because of Representative Johnson with her leadership and her inspirational story and relating the common sense legislation that needs to be taking place, not only in Tennessee, but throughout the nation. Thank you, everybody, for being with us with Coffee with Democrats. Thank you so much for joining in. We look forward to being with you again next Thursday. And again, it'll be from 10:30 to 11. And until then, everybody, please be safe. Thank you so much.